Dan Borvan.
Hey.
Always good to have you back on the AGR podcast. How you doing?
Rainy day in Southern California.
It is coming. It's supposed to come down for like a week straight.
Yeah. I didn't sign up for this.
Well, yeah, this is like Washington.
Yeah, or England, where I lived for 5 years, and almost driving me insane. So
yeah, it's funny. We lived in Washington for 8 years, and I think one year it rained like 40 days straight. Thought the flood was coming, and we complain. We get now that we're down here, I get 2 days and I fall apart. You know? So,
40 days straight, man. What are you preaching through Job at that time or something? Like you need, you got to lean into that.
Yeah, I think there's some kind of record up there. But well, good to have you. I thought today we could talk a little. You know, it's almost like now, in light of our environment, tense environment, politically charged environment, theologically charged environment. Everyone's an expert. Everyone's commenting. It's you just don't know what controversy is coming. And
everyone's on edge.
Everyone's
like
on
just
edge.
Waiting.
What is the deal?
To fight. Relax.
I bet some guys have articles prepared. They thought, okay, this thing's going to happen. I've written the article.
The gun's loaded.
And as soon as the controversy breaks, boom, send. You know, I mean that's the culture we're in. You know, pundits everywhere.
And people ask me, you know, do I follow these feuds on social media? And I say, when I'm walking down the street and I hear two people screaming at each other, do I get involved? No, I keep walking.
Well,
I ignore it as much as I can.
That's just your maturity. You don't remember in grade school when two kids fought, what everyone did?
Fight.
Everyone ran. Everyone went to watch this. I mean, that was the entertainment.
And now you got to whip out your phone and film it. Yeah. Thankfully, you didn't have those in our day.
So, I mean, it's sad. It's sad. And you know, I told somebody the other day, it really makes ministry a challenge. Here, it's amazing ministry is being done in this environment. That the Lord, I mean, his power is still shown, works through it, but everyone's doing what's right in their own eyes. I mean, if there's ever a time like that's happened, that's what we're in. So, and I mean, it's good for people to think through issues and discuss them. I don't, that's right. That's good. But,
is there much thinking going on? That's what I'm concerned about.
And do we even know how to read text anymore? If you put a post up today, it doesn't matter how clear you are. Somebody's going to misconstrue it and then, you know, blast it from the opposite angle.
Yeah. And then what do? Call the guy out for, do you know how to read? I mean, you can't be that cruel. You know, it's just, don't respond to the trolls. Yeah. When people misunderstand me, it's
freeing, isn't it?
Yeah. Just
don't respond.
Not interested.
But this Alistair Begg thing's interesting. I mean, it's interesting. It really does. And we can get into the rightness, the correctness, the wrongness. That's what we'll do here in a minute. But aside from that, just the sort of response of what this generated and how it blew up publicly on social media. And all of a sudden I see calls that Alistair Begg needs to resign. Resign. You know, we don't really have that category in ecclesiology, but you know, that's what everyone. So, you know, I just see him being the vitriol and the brutal attacks on the man. It's really stunning. I mean, you could have 40 years of very good ministry, Dan, and make one real bad comment. And in this environment, you could the bus could go right over you.
They put you on the iceberg and send you out to sea. It's over.
It's something.
Yeah, I don't get it. We need ecclesiology in these matters.
Yeah.
To think through these things in a logical, thoughtful way and address concerns, legitimate concerns, but not just throwing rocks at each other on social media.
Yeah.
That never helped anybody.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's avenues before we get into sort of the issue here. There's avenues of dealing with things. And I think that's the first thing, you know, maybe to keep in mind here. We really do lack a good ecclesiology in America. I mean, and maybe it is a sort of celebrity pastor thing that's happened. And maybe it is that everyone now has a platform, everyone has a pulpit, and we've lost a sense that there is an accountability structure over us. There are elders that should be in place to govern us and to check our lives, especially as pastors, you know. So we're not freelancers, but almost in all of these controversial situations, what we have is some kind of celebrity pastor at the top, somebody who's been highly influential, who's been given a big platform. I mean, we've got a little platform here. We use it, but that then they become the sort of focal point in any controversy or anything. So I think of COVID, where, John MacArthur became the gold standard in the thing. And I wondered, well, who's writing the letters here? Is it John MacArthur telling us to get back to church, or is it his elders? I never knew who's running this, right?
Well, yeah, that's the benefit, in our denomination, in the United Reformed churches, when we do weigh in on an issue, it's the church weighing in on it. Federal vision,
right?
Things like that. These major issues that the church does need to address. It's the whole church doing it. Right. It's not just one celebrity pastor's opinion on a certain subject,
right?
And that's much more. You see much more careful reasoning, careful communication that way. It's spread out amongst all the churches. It's not just one guy as the figurehead and what he says goes. It'd be nice if evangelicalism had a more robust ecclesiology, so it wouldn't just be these talking head celebrity pastors weighing in on things, and then they go at each other, and then there's no resolution,
right?
Because there's no means for a resolution, because they don't have church courts,
right?
So one pastor attacks another pastor, and then it just goes away,
right?
Nothing ever happens.
Yeah, and so that presents a challenge for addressing error. Right. I mean, you can do things in a churchly manner, which I always think should be, the sort of primary goal in addressing error. But then, it opens it up because of this lack of accountability. And because, in this situation, imagine in that situation, if a pastor like Begg says something wrong here, and the elders immediately come out and say, listen, we've talked with our pastor. We've admonished our pastor. We don't agree with this. Our pastor has submitted to our counsel. How that would take different shape online, instead of the pastor doing his own thing and then everyone immediately jumping in to chop him up on the chopping block right after. That's just, everything about it's wrong.
Right. And I think the issue for us is, it's not about Alistair Begg. I don't have any opinions on Alistair Begg whatsoever. He's not in my circle. What he says doesn't really matter to me. The issue is important, though.
Yeah.
Whether or not Christians should attend a gay wedding.
Yeah.
So the issue is something we should address and wrestle with, but it doesn't really matter that he says it. What happens to him, that's neither here nor there for me in our circles.
Yeah. I think some people, struggle with, when you have this kind of platform and this kind of influence, it's remarkable, how much influence Alistair Begg has. And I had somebody call me just yesterday and say, I heard about this Begg situation, and we had that very situation about a gay marriage, and we knew somebody who said no, and it caused huge controversy in the family. So here they hear Begg, this influential figure, saying it. It does at times put us in a bad predicament for our people who are constantly listening to somebody with this kind of notoriety.
Right. And as much as we could try, we often can't steer our people to listen to the best voices out there. Sometimes it baffles me when I hear Reformed Christians say, oh, I listened to this guy, and I think, this guy really? Can't you listen to R.C. Sproul?
Yeah.
Or some solid URC pastors? People ask me, who do I listen to? I always say people you never heard of.
Yeah.
My favorite preachers are guys nobody's ever heard of.
Yeah.
And to me, they're the best, But
it really comes down to platform.
Yeah.
Like a lot of these guys, you think of somebody like Charles Stanley, David Jeremiah, these guys have huge platforms, and our people are listening to these guys, they're on the radio, and it can present real challenges, mainly just because of the depth of the teaching. It's just not there. Right. So it's just very shallow stuff. But in these sort of, in platforms, all of a sudden you get a statement like this that was said, you see how quick it can cause a major controversy.
Yeah.
So, and maybe that's, so I guess ideally what we want to see, what should be in place, I know I think at Parkside Church, their constitution, it's constitutional. I mean, it's congregational. So, there's no real way for elders to do that. It's congregation voting to address what they would perceive as error. But whatever the case, one of the best things to have in place to protect me. I'm prone to err. So are you.
Sure.
Any of us can make statements that are false. Any of us can fall into. We even sign a form of subscription that we make a promise when we go into this to die for the doctrine, basically.
Right.
And if our views change, that we promise to tell our elders.
We have to report that.
We have to report that.
Yeah.
And that protects the church, and it protects, the sheep, and it protects us in many ways.
And it's a great guardrail almost that an assurance that anyone who subscribes those confessions, we can trust that he's going to preach in accordance with those confessions. Right. So we don't have to wonder if something's going to come out of left field,
right?
Some obscure doctrine or some idiosyncrasy that only he holds to. Those confessional commitments are safeguards for the congregation.
Right. They're intended to be. And we're not freelancers. I just think in the American model of church, people are so accustomed to, I think we may have talked about this before, so accustomed to the pastor running the show. He's so much of the CEO figure. He's, if you ever have any kind of attention given to your church from the news outlets, they're going to the main pastor and they think, he's the guy. He's the one running the church. That's the perception out there, And that's just not how the Lord set this up. Paul went around appointing elders in every city. Elders have the crucial responsibility to oversee my life, your life, and our doctrine. Like, what we believe, what we teach, what we preach. So when that's not in place, what you essentially get and what you create is an environment of a super pastor. This is what Paul complained about in 1 Corinthians.
And I make a point, not only publicly, but also privately, in our congregation, that I want to be associated with spiritual matters in the church, preaching, teaching, leading worship, all that. Of course, I am the leader in those areas. Any of the business of the church, I take a huge step back. I don't want to be associated at all with any financial issues of the church, reporting on the collections, the budget, those sorts of things. I don't want to be associated publicly with any of those things so that people don't confuse my spiritual leadership with this business leadership. And so there's a merging of those things in their minds subconsciously. I want them to associate me with spiritual matters, not with business matters.
It's so wise. Many a pastor has ruined his ministry because he became controlling over every square inch of ministry life, right? And we had a building project here not too long ago, and they came to me and said, well, what do you envision for a building? And I said, I'm going to stay out of the whole thing. I just asked, build a church, have a pulpit, and put the people on me. That seems pretty reasonable, but I knew enough. I mean, this is just goes with the territory. When you start getting in as a pastor into all those things, you're crossing over. First off, I'm not an expert.
Right.
In those things. I mean, a lot of these guys own businesses. They're older than me. They've been in life. Elders means older. And we have the diaconate deacons for a reason, to oversee the finances of the church, the shepherding of the needs of the body. That's why God called them to those offices. Right. So, well, with this situation, I think it's helpful to think a little bit about, since it's kind of a hot topic, to think about, the comments that Begg made, and not so much just to focus on Begg, but to help, I think, people wrestle through these complex issues. There's issues relating to sin, conscience, what is the right thing to do, what's the wrong thing to do in very complex situations, and how we handled it. I think my first concern in this whole thing is that immediately, Dan, it seemed like it fell into the culture war camps. In other words, you had some people who saw this, opportunity. I'm not saying this is across the board, but there are some saw this opportunity to crush what is perceived as to be the sort of weak, liberal, woke side of Christianity. And it immediately falls into camps. It immediately falls into the sort of behavior that comes out of the Christian nationalist movement on the one end. And then, everyone's putting camps immediately without really looking carefully at the issue itself biblically and confessionally wrestling through it.
Yeah, and that's something obviously we see so often in our culture politically. And wouldn't it be nice if Christians didn't reflect that tribalism of the culture?
Exactly.
But the first chance we get, we do the same thing. It's just sad.
Yeah, it's just sad. This is what we do. And I always feel like I don't fit into any of it. Like, I'm not saying, I'm not like in the sovereign middle, but I will say that I don't fit into the sort of the Christian nationalist idea of, and what they're proposing of, taking back the state and bringing back Christendom with the ideals that they've proposed, nor do I am I at all attracted to the compromise, wokeism that's clearly a new orthodoxy.
A pox on both their houses. I don't want either one in charge.
But it seems like everyone's falling into one camp or the other.
Yeah, no thanks. I'm on the sidelines with the popcorn meme, watching them fight it out.
Okay.
I don't want to hang out with either group.
Yeah. So that aside, right? You can't accuse Dan Borvan or Chris Gordon of falling into these camps. We've spoken against both sides of these things.
My tribe is no tribe.
That aside, the issue itself. So Begg says, he's giving advice to a grandmother. His response is, listen, I may give different advice in light of a different circumstance. Which
was very confusing to me. I mean, are we in situational ethics here? Like, why would it be different? The issue itself, whether or not to attend a gay wedding, what could change with that, what I would regard as a sinful issue that would make it okay in one instance and not okay in another instance?
Right.
He didn't really give an example. I didn't hear of another occasion in which he would advise someone not to attend.
Right. So as the controversy went, right, he makes this statement to a grandmother that, listen, in this situation, I think you should go to the gay wedding for your grandson or whoever it was. And I think, you're not supporting his ideas. You're not affirming the marriage, but you're showing compassion to try to have basically an avenue, prodigal son type thing for that son to come home. Okay. We can appreciate the angle of wrestling through how to be compassionate to sinners.
Sure.
I don't see a lot of that today. I don't know. It's like people are trashing pretty good, but this gets down to the issue of, is this a marriage? Is this legitimate? What does my presence say?
Yes.
What am I joining in on? How is it viewed? These are ethical issues that have to be considered. And you're absolutely right. It's not like this sort of thing changes from circumstance to circumstance. This is sort of, it's either a conscience issue or I am engaging and putting myself into a position of supporting what is against nature and against God's law.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what would change? Okay, grandmother, granddaughter in this case. What about mother, daughter? Is it not okay then? Or brother, sister? The brother doesn't want to attend the sister's gay wedding?
What about polyamorous marriage? Do they have those? They have those now, right?
Probably.
I think that's
they have everything.
So they have everything. So what about that? What's the line of immorality here? Like if there was a bestiality celebration, what's the line? Like I'm saying, what's the line here?
Right. And if the issue is, well, we have to maintain the relationship, lines of communication, therefore I'm going to attend. Well, then in what situation, if those are the two goals, if those are the goals as well, to maintain the relationship, when would you not attend? Is there a scenario in which you would not attend, yet you still can maintain that relationship with the person in the gay wedding? To me, the issue is this something I can participate in under all circumstances? Mm-hmm. And it's part of the broader category of not just the lesbian wedding that he was referencing, but as you said, any aberrant form of marriage, any union that is not God-ordained, God-designed. Mm-hmm. So we shouldn't get hung up just on the gay thing, which is so easy to get hung up on.
Right.
The issue is a union that God does not bless. That is, in fact, no union at all. It's not a real marriage.
It's not a real marriage. Right.
So how many Christians who got bent out of shape with the advice to attend a gay wedding would also, how many of them would say, I will not attend a wedding between a Christian and a non-Christian? I'm not going to a gay wedding, and I'm not going to a wedding with people unequally yoked.
Yeah, so let's that's a good point here. Let's back the situation up. Like Paul talks about there's sins that are against nature, but let's go back for a minute, just in sins that are typical to common life, right? Man and a woman decide to get married. One's a believer, one's not a believer. You and I, we are not permitted as ministers to even perform or officiate that wedding. Like that
I have refused.
Yeah,
to do that.
I've done it too. I mean, I've had a situation where somebody asked me to marry them, and they were living together before marriage, but they said they were Christians, and they were doing other things, and I had to write them a letter saying, "Listen, I love you, right? I'm not against you. I'm for you, but for me to be able to do this in conscience, in light of the Word of God, in light of my convictions." Here's what you have to do. You basically have to repent.
Yeah.
You have to repent. You have to repent of your choices. And here's something. For all this talk of trying to win over people, and you know, if we tell people they're wrong, we're gonna drive them away, all that we incessantly hear. In my particular situation, they repented.
Wow.
And one of my stipulations was you need to join a church. They did.
Yeah. And
they needed somebody to come along and simply tell them, have somebody with courage to tell them that what they were doing was wrong. And you know what? It was like the light bulb went on, and it was freeing for them.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Or you could have just done it and in hopes, well, I'll perform the wedding, just hoping that we can continue lines of communication, and maybe one day I'll nice them into the kingdom. No, you told them the truth. They repented and were restored. That's wonderful.
So is there any fundamental difference, Stan, if we're ministers and we said, okay, they want to get married, I don't want to offend them, I'm going to perform the wedding, as to going?
Yeah.
Just attending?
Right. Because what are we saying in attendance at this wedding? You're a witness to this union. You're part of a celebration of this union. And then there's a great moment in every wedding. If anyone objects to these two being united together, let him speak now.
Yeah.
Well, are we going to swallow our tongue in that moment when the Christian is marrying the non-Christian?
Yeah.
Are we going to tell them, Paul says you're unequally yoked. You better stop this right now. Now, if you're going to attend with that purpose in mind, go for it.
Yeah. Well, and that gets to the conscience. If somebody plays the conscience card and says, listen, I have a conscience. I can't, it's a conscience issue. I feel free in that situation to go and support that. I don't think they'd say support in a conscience issue, but they'd say to be there because I'm just recognizing what's happening. I may not even affirm it or support it, but you're raising another good point. Historically, that question was asked, right? Does anyone have any lawful objection? You would be conscience bound then to raise your hand and to say, absolutely, because God has commanded this, and this is this.
Yeah. So are you then sinning by staying quiet? Seems to me that's not a place I want to be in. So I'm just not going to go.